All right, let's get into the actual edit now. We usually edit on a faster speed, usually about 2x, depending on the pace of the speaker. Maybe we'll drop that to like 1.7, 1.8. If you're new to editing, I recommend sticking just with 1. Keep it, at the actual pace of the audio. As you get more experience, you can kind of bump this up. And experience both in editing itself and with familiarity with the voice. Because, when you have a better understanding of, how someone talks and their phrasing, it makes it easier to spot if there's a potential mistake when you're going at a faster speed. So if you're editing your own show, you should probably have no trouble going a little faster early on because you know yourself or your co-host or what have you. But, for client work, as you get more comfortable with each individual podcast and the host or hosts, you can kind of gradually ramp this thing up. But we're going to jump into the edit. I'm going to let's go about 1.7. Let's do 1.5. That way we're not too blazing fast, but a little more than real time. I'm going to leave the screen recording running the whole time. When I notice things that we need to remove or take out, I will kind of stop and comment on that, explain a little bit about what we're doing. Last thing before we jump in, I know if you're familiar with Descript, you might know about the automatic word removal. And if you don't, I'll talk a little bit about this now. And it's something that's helpful, but we want to be careful about how it gets used. So if you hit Command F, it will bring open this search function. And you can search for words. So this is handy, like if you're looking for a particular phrase and you want to look up Airbnb, for example. I know these girls talk about Airbnb. You can type that in and you can find it. But you can also switch the search here to word gaps, which would show you anything where there's a gap of silence. Be very careful with this one because what it means is a word gap is any gap of time where there isn't a word. I know that sounds obvious, but what I mean is there is a sound right here, but it's gray, which means Descript has not automatically paired this to part of the transcript. So this is something that would get deleted if you were removing word gaps, even though there is something here. You want to listen to this before you delete it or keep it. But because it, for whatever reason, missed the transcript or missed the word, it would cut this. Anything gray throughout your waveform here, it's going to do that too. So be very careful with this. Usually what I'll do is punch in like, let's say 2 seconds of a word gap. And that's something that's egregiously long, which should definitely be looked at and is probably a pause or a mistake. And there's nothing in this composition with that. And maybe we'll just back it off and go to like 1 second. And you can click to audition these. So let me just click one. So here's a perfect example. This is not a word gap. It's not silence. They're them laughing and an inhale. So it's gray because there's no words associated with it. But we don't want to automatically delete this because obviously there's audio there. We want to keep it in. So this is what I mean about being careful with this like automatic search and like automatic removal. It's because you could just say any word gap longer than 1 second, which is all of these. I want to shorten all of them to half a second, and I can apply and it will trim all of them. But again, you're going to automatically lose all of these, so be careful with that. But if you want to search, this does make it easy to spot.
Step 1. I then would leave.
Click all of these one at a time. It's going to play the section that's in question.
Step 1.
Again, to replay.
I then would leave.
And then you can
How much we respect.
You can easily delete or ignore these as you go through. So that's word gaps. And then the same applies for filler words. So it has a batch of these built into the system, filler words that it's going to try to detect throughout the composition. So this will become more clear as we actually go through this edit. I know there's a lot of preamble, but I want to make sure this is explained so that this doesn't happen to your composition. We want to make sure that the phrasing and the pacing of the speech is preserved whenever possible. So like if I were to tell Descript to automatically remove all of the ums in the entire composition, half of them are going to be chopped, half of them are going to be, you know, part of a given word, and we're going to lose part of that word. There might be part of a breath inhale or exhale before or after the and all of that's going to get trimmed incorrectly, and it's going to sound choppy and it's going to sound horrible. So let's look at an example of this. Like, let me just select as a filler word, and it's going to tell me there's 54 ums in this episode. So let's just play a couple. Really,
someone new. And
I'll put this back to 1x for this.
Find someone new. And
so this is a great example of one that you actually do want to cut. So if I select this and I do Command Delete, okay, so we thought it was a good example, but you can see one of the problems here with Descript. So let me undo that so you can see what happened. So in the audio waveform here, it has highlighted the that I want to remove. But in the transcript, it's gone too far back. It's taken the comma before the here, and if I delete this, it's going to take the word in front of it as well. And that is absolutely not what we want. So again, you're seeing why some of these automatic filler words and removals and stuff are not ideal. They can be helpful, but they're not ideal. So in this case, what I want to do is switch my search back to text, and I'm going to type space, space. Space, space, So no extra space after it. So now if I search for one of these,
I've actually,
it's not highlighting the previous comma or the previous word. And if I did want to delete this, it will just take the that I've selected. So class, I can't stop saying while I'm recording these, especially when I'm talking about ums. It's funny. So if you wanted to do a quick pass and remove all of the ums before you jump into the edit, that is a great way to do things. And that way, when you're listening through, you're focused less on distracting filler words because you know you already removed all of them. You're focused more on the content itself. So that stuff is something that you can do.
Instagram with,
and I will do a couple of these right now so you can see kind of the process behind that. We try to preserve them unless the or the filler word that you're looking for is separated by itself. We almost always leave it in. So for example, here,
their whole Instagram with their dog.
The is connected to the next word. So if I wanted to take this out,
their whole Instagram with their dog.
You can hear as we get into the word Instagram, it's choppy. We're losing a bit of that first consonant there.
Out their whole Instagram with their,
and it's just not as clean. So in that case, it's the fact that the word Instagram sounds weird is distracting, and I'd rather leave the in there. And that's the process that will follow throughout this entire episode.
One thing that I love kind of the,
so this is a good example of one that can't be cut.
I love kind of the cadence.
And you notice that once I do delete it, it does remove the but always be careful. Always look at the waveform and the regions down here. That's why I make this part of the viewer so big, is because it removed the but it left a little bit of audio here. It's not 100% perfect. So I removed the but I also need to slide this region back so it gets rid of that piece of audio. Otherwise, it's going to be left in there. And it's going to be able to hear that. All right, let's play that.
Thing that I love kind of the cadence.
Okay, so that is pretty good, but she also has like a bit of a mouth noise and kind of like a pause before that. So the removal sounds good, and then I'm just going to tighten this up a little bit by moving the waveform back, the region back.
Through one thing that I love kind of the cadence.
And I think that sounds great.
They do 5-star review.
Again, that's another one that's kind of connected and kind of sandwiched in between a couple words. I'm going to leave it.
They do some action.
So I'm going to remove this one and remove the extra phrase of some, and we'll see if I can make this a little cleaner. Here's a good example. So again, this is kind of the opposite. So on the last that we removed, it left a bit of waveform that it should have taken out that we had to trim. And in this case, I'm removing it, and it took a little too much out of the previous word. So I'm going to slide this back just a bit and hear how this sounds.
They do some action shots of what you...
Fantastic.
For people knowing that.
So I'm going to remove this one. And again, you see I got a little trimming action to do here.
for people knowing that
Good.
is in their bio.
Sandwiched, I keep it.
Get to the nitty gritty.
That is from the word the to it's all connected. It's almost like it's one word now. So that's connected, so I can't take that one out.
We're going to unpack a situation that we've
Also connected.
I've actually
This one, if I were keeping this it is connected, and I would want to leave it as is. But because I heard this, I see she's kind of restarting her sentence here. So what I'm going to do is delete this and I'm going to make the cut even larger. I'm going to take out that first phrase of I and then clean up the waveform here, and let's hear what this sounds like.
discuss it here in the pod.
I'm actually going to quote this.
And I'm going to go one further and remove this I as well. So she starts with I'm.
Here in the pod.
I'm actually going to quote. This is.
And that sounds great.
It was so the truth.
Here's a good example where it is isolated, but because of her phrasing, she's pausing, she's thinking about what she's going to say next. It's something that I actually might want to keep in. Let me listen to the longer phrasing here.
I do want to quote him because I thought it was just like, it was so the truth, because we were talking about.
And let's hear, I'll try to remove it. Let's play a little bit with this and see how it sounds.
It's just like, it was so the truth, because we were talking about turnover on your.
So in this case, I kind of like it. An alternative option here would be to leave it in so that we have kind of that pause in the phrasing and just shorten this gap a little bit so it's not so long. And you can leave it like this.
It was so the truth, because we were talking.
I would kind of say both of those options work. I'm going to go ahead and remove it.
It was so the truth, because we were.
But again, I kind of think both of those could work just fine.
And people can just move on.
Great example here of selecting the in the search and hitting Command Delete and having it remove it cleanly with no mistakes. So ideally, this is what we want Descript to be doing. We can quickly go audition the
and people can just move on.
Command Delete, remove it, and move right on with the next one. And just note you can always click
and
this again. So it detected the we deleted it. The is still here. That's why we used the strike through function instead of actually deleting it. So if you click this again, it will play the same part that you just auditioned with the edit, and you can listen back and make sure that it's clean.
If they're a vendor.
And as you get more used to this, you'll see, like, I click this, and I'm almost, before I even listen to it, I'm ready to click the next one because I can see that it's connected, so I'm going to move right on.
A vendor, if you have a contract at the beginning, and so if they're a vendor. If they're a vendor, if you have a contract. Or a vendor, if you have a contract.
She's kind of struggling to start that word, so this one might sound a little weird. Let's trim this.
If they're a vendor, if you have a contract with them ahead of time.
That's better.
At the beginning, and so that goes, but the beginning.
Here is an example of what we refer to as crosstalk. I'm going to keep this in here. We'll talk about that when we get into the edit itself. Let's just leave that. We'll come back to that one.
But I think there's a way to.
Now, this is kind of a personal preference thing that I'm going to edit here, but a lot of people will say but and then start their next phrase. If that happens a lot, it does kind of sound natural to leave it. I mean, that is how people talk at the end of the day. You know, we're not making an AI voice here. This is people talking. Don't forget that. So we could take this out. Leaving it with the but at the end of the sentence might sound weird. Let's listen.
Square up with those, but I think there's a way to definitely.
In this case, it worked, depending on how the phrasing kind of came in at this next sentence, and if she was kind of maybe stuttering to think of the next line or taking a while, taking a pause to kind of think of her next thought. you might want to keep that in there. Keep the full but. In other cases, depending on how this next sentence is, you could even tail this back further and remove the but altogether. I'm going to leave it as is for right now.
Here, are there training
Another great example of one that's fully isolated. Command delete, done.
or what you expect from?
This one is a little tight. So because it's starting a phrase, it's a clean gap beforehand. So at least the start of this word, I can definitely take it out. But you see it is kind of connected into the next word. So it's kind of 50-50. Let's delete it and then hear what it sounds like.
Or what you expect from an operator to do.
It's not bad. I'm going to tighten this and
What you expect from an.
I'm not going to do this crossfade. I'm going to talk about that in a separate step. All right. So I'm going to leave that one. Good.
Pictures,
That one's definitely removable.
If there is there's been repeat.
Let's try it.
Yes.
Like if there's been repeated issues, it's like
That one is a bit stumbly either way. So with the or without it, I think it kind of sounds, it's giving you the same kind of like indecision about the word either way. So personal preference on that one.
we had someone
That's connected to the had, so I'm going to skip it.
actually her cleaning team
So remove this one. I can also take the out of here.
is actually her cleaning team has asked for a pretty fine.
Great. I'm glad we came across this one. So the is isolated, and I can take it out. Good. What we need to be careful of is this breath. So let me play it one more time.
It was a no open market and try to find someone new.
So we got two breaths. Find, inhale, inhale. So we can remove the but you need to be careful where that breath is getting trimmed. How does it flow into the next word? Do you want to keep it or do you want to trim this off as well? So first things first, let's slide this region back so that I don't cut the waveform of the breath at all. I'll shorten this and let's hear what the breath sounds like going into someone.
Back to the open market and try to find someone new. And that was it was a no-brainer for.
This is tricky, and this is just kind of takes a lot of listening to different people speaking to kind of get a sense of what sounds natural. I don't think the inhale before the word someone makes sense. It doesn't sound, because that's not the word that she said after the breath. So it sounds a little awkward. So I'm gonna tail this back.
If she were to go back to the open market and try to find someone new, and that was it was a no-brainer.
When people pause mid-sentence, inhale, and pick back up, they're usually overemphasizing that next word. Someone is not really overemphasized, so to leave that breath in there, like there was a pause, it doesn't sound quite as natural as tailing that breath back so that we go from find into someone as if it's one sentence like that.
Market and try to find someone new, and that was it was.
So there's always something important whenever someone pauses a word or a sentence to take a breath, whether you're cutting something out before or after it, or you're trying to kind of like reform a sentence, make sure that the waveform is not cutting the breath off prematurely, and then make sure that the breath makes sense in context with the next word.
So I want to give some training.
All right, so that is kind of all the use cases for this. I'm just going to keep going through.
Just having that.
Now that we've seen a couple different examples, I'm just going to go through quickly and start running this out.
Particular situation. I'm going to LinkedIn.
Okay, so of course, as I said this, now I found what I need to talk about. We got a couple kind of stutters here. I probably want to do this.
I'm going to LinkedIn, following someone on LinkedIn right now, and every day it's their business, but I'm going to LinkedIn, following someone on LinkedIn.
So perfect world, if there was some space here, it'd be great to start and then go to following someone on LinkedIn. I do not think that's going to give us a clean cut if we try to do that, though. Let's see.
But I'm following someone on LinkedIn.
Yeah, we don't have the real estate with this to make that cut happen. So it's going to sound a little stumbly either way. I removed some of the extra words, and we're going to have to leave it like this for now.
In following some the everyday.
Here's another inhale. The is the next thing after the inhale. That got the emphasis, and starting this sentence, the everyday property manager, is not going to sound weird if we leave the breath in here. So your choice is either remove the and tail this back and see if you like that.
Property managers, and the everyday the property manager is talking.
I think that's okay.
Property managers, and the everyday the property manager is talking about.
She said the by accident, so we're going to go back one extra word.
Property managers, and every day the property manager is talking about.
I like that. If you were to leave it in, make sure you leave that breath in as well.
The through line in every. Right. The through line in every.
Here's an interesting one. If you were listening, you could tell through line was this right here. So this is a case where Descript actually moved, it put the word in the wrong spot, matched to the audio. You can change that. That's kind of like a transcription editing thing. We're not going to talk about that today. But beware of that. When you do see an you play it and you see, oh, that doesn't really quite line up with what I heard. Trust your ears first, always. The is actually here. And unfortunately, it's connected to the in, so we're going to have to just leave that one. But beware of when you see anything gray should be suspect, and then, trust what you're hearing first, then match it to the transcript. Don't just take Descript's word for it that this is and that it's matched to that, because not always works like that.
Right. Well, just like, yes. Right. Well, just like.
Only had to part ways with.
Good.
Ways with this backbone of the company, a cleaner.
Good.
Okay. Okay. And we take everything that we clean.
Your husband.
And this you can update the back of house doors, quirks about washers and dryers.
I'm gonna go back to this one.
The back of house of the property, so codes to all the doors.
See if I can make that work.
Also in Breezeway, you can update the back of house of the properties.
That's not the best sounding cut of all time, but I don't think anyone besides us will notice that. I think I'm going to leave it.
Doors, quirks about wash.
That one sounds good.
Really shaping up.
This one worked out nicely. A lot of the times, if we're someone's starting with a word that begins with an S or an F, they might give it like a really long, like shaping up, like a really long, I don't even know what you call it, like lead into the word. And if that was the case, it might have made this cut a little less clean. So just, again, I'm just thinking of things that you notice after a while. We were able to do it this time, but whenever you have an S or an F, and sometimes words that begin with H, there's a couple of them that will kind of have that like lead in, ramp up.
We spoke at the Invest conference 2 weeks ago in Scottsdale, Arizona. Onboarding experience.
That's the we'll give some visibility. So I think. So I think
this one's a little tough. We are just trying to get rid of the filler words at the moment. I think because there's a couple extra things here, I'll probably leave that for a regular, like edit that as part of like the regular edit, not this initial step here.
It. You're human. That's why we going to feel it. You're human. That's.
Let me try to remove that. Yeah.
You are going to feel it. You're human. That's why we're pretty
cool.
And so it matters.
This season, yeah. So
it's an interesting one. I'm gonna get rid of the yeah and see if I like it picking up with so.
Busy season. So I hope that helps someone.
I think that works. If we were to just remove the fact that she kind of says yeah, so it's like she's switching from one sentence to the next one. It's a bit of a transition, and I think it would sound weird without all of that in there. But luckily, keeping it with just the word so, I think that works.
Talk to you next time.
Cool. That is the filler word removal. So we already got a good chunk of the actual editing done. I like to do it in two parts like this because you're thinking the more surgical stuff that you would say we're cleaning up to make someone sound more intelligible. That's been done. And now going through it, when we get to the edit in the next video, that will be more of a editing for content, sections, phrasing, repetition, that kind of stuff you can pay a little bit more attention to, plus like some of the production notes or requests from the client. You can kind of focus on these two things separately. So ums are the big one. The only other thing I would say to go through in this step before we get to the main edit is you kind of have to know the voice, and does this particular voice do a lot of filler words? So like you might have a client who says, you know, a lot. And that's something that I would look out for in addition to it kind of depends on the speaker. Not everyone uses the same kind of like phrasing or pauses or filler words as other people. So that's something that you kind of will listen through. You know, maybe we'll listen through this edit and I heard a bunch of you knows, and then at the end I'll go back and I'll do a filler word search again and just make sure I've caught them all. But you kind of have to know the voice to know what to look for. I would also say, let's get an in there as well. It's a lot less common, but it's the same kind of placement as an So let's check these really quick.
As someone, it's also ends up. Anyways,
no, but you know, when is there an issue? Is there an issue with how the issues? Is there an issue with? Is
in every?
We'll explain that a little bit.
Okay, so the and the are done. Now, if you go to the filler words filter again, you will see all of the suggestions. But you know, I guess I mean suppose, kind of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you have someone that does a lot of likes, that's something that you want to be aware of. But again, I think the and the will take care of most of it. And then the rest you're going to either leave because it sounds natural or you're going to catch in the main edit. So filler words are now gone and we can move on.